Okay, so every draft, the main players we talk about are the ones at the top of the draft, which makes sense, right? Those are in theory the best players. But there every year will be a handful of selections that fell in the draft that ultimately end up being really good selections. So in this video, I'm going to talk about 7 of those. I'm going to try to predict 7 players who maybe have flown under the radar, but could ultimately end up being very good players for their respective teams. A couple of honorable mentions before I get started. First, I did throw Will Howard on there just as a backup for the Steelers, backup quarterback, who maybe has potential to, he did run the offense well at Ohio State. Maybe he is more than that, more than just a traditional Ohio State quarterback. So in a situation where he could start, no one's really talking about him, so I figured I'd throw him into honorable mentions. Also, David Walker, a player who dominated lower level of competition. He got drafted by Tampa Bay. We'll see if he can do anything. But let's get into the actual list, starting off with number 7. The Seattle Seahawks selected Damen Martinez with pick 223. He was projected to go 101, so that's pretty good value right away, right? And I don't fully get why people felt like he was gonna fall. I know he does somewhat. A criticism has been levied at him is he isn't great at pass blocking, so you can kind of only use him in certain situations. But that's okay for a pick that late, and for a player who's as good of a runner as he is. He kind of checks every box. I'm surprised he fell as far as he did. So he's someone I could definitely see succeeding. Next up is a player who was selected with a comp pick in the 5th round. So that's 172nd overall. Chris Paul Jr. No relation to the basketball player. But he's an off-ball linebacker who's going to play for the Rams. The Rams, notoriously, that's a room you can maybe find your way into, right? It's not, always the strongest, although it was all right last year. But there's definitely room for him to potentially, find a way to get into a starting job. And while he wasn't a prospect I was blown away by or anything, I do think he has some value. If they can develop kind of some of his, weaker traits, again, for a guy who is a 5th round pick, I think he has real potential to be a starter in this league, especially with the Rams, who tend to not ask too much of their linebackers. So keep an eye on him. Number 5 on the list, I am going Jack Sawyer, an edge rusher who, so he was projected to go 67th. He ends up falling to 123, and I thought he should have been higher than that. I think I had a close to a 1st round grade on Sawyer, despite the fact that he was projected to go late in the 2nd and fell all the way to the 120s. He's someone who's just a good football player. I know he isn't an athletic freak, and I know that he doesn't necessarily look the part. I think looks are playing a real role in this because he just doesn't look as athletic as some of these other guys, and that does sometimes matter. But I don't know, for the Pittsburgh Steelers to get an edge rusher who they definitely don't need, they're kind of loaded there. The biggest question, they're completely loaded there. The biggest question I have is just, is he going to get playing time? And that I don't know, but I think he could be a really good player. At number 4, I'm going with a wide receiver, which you could argue, okay, are wide receivers ever really under the radar prospects? Everyone knows when their team drafts a wide receiver, right? We all watch the highlights when our favorite team drafts a wide receiver. But Jack Beck, of the now Las Vegas Raiders, I like this for 2 reasons. One, I just think he's a good player. I think he's an underrated prospect, so getting him at 58, even if he was projected to go 72, that's still, to me, I'm still fine with that, and I think I would have even justified it a little earlier. The other thing is, so they went after Ashton Genty. They want to be able to run the ball and establish the run. Well, what does that do? Well, it means that when you run play action, linebackers move in, so now over the middle can be opened up, right? Well, now you have a guy who can be great over the middle. So not that he was the only guy. You had Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers who can also do that, but they're trying to dominate at one section of the offense, which last year they didn't dominate anywhere on offense. So that's definitely something that you can, if you have, it can add a lot of value. And I just think he's a good player. So yeah, that's why he makes the list. Number 3, I'm going New England Patriots wide receiver, Kyle Williams. So again, can a wide receiver be an under the radar pick? Well, I don't know. But if we say that they can, him and Beck both make the list. Kyle Williams is the player who is just so explosive. He cuts so smoothly. He should be awesome in this Josh McDaniels offense. He should do a lot of really nice things for them. And I just think he's a great player. So when you talk about good scheme fit, good player. Third round pick. I think he could be one of those guys that we look at during the season and say, well, how did he fall to the third round? Why was he not I had a first round grade on him, so I am very high on Kyle Williams. We'll see if I'm just crazy, but I think he's a really underrated prospect, so I have him as my number 3 under the radar player to look out for. Number 2 is Siobhan Revel Jr., the East Carolina player who's just he got drafted by the Dallas Cowboys with pick 76. He was projected to go 42nd. And again, 42nd, was that exactly where he should have gone? I don't know, but at 76, it's quite the steal, I would say. So this is the guy who has an athletic profile that is, his traits are through the roof. He is, he's physical. He's a fast player. This is a guy who ran a 4.40 40-yard dash after working a shift at an Amazon warehouse, because that's what he was working at, which is kind of crazy. The injury history is, to me, the biggest concern. There's little nitpicks on tape, but he is coming off an ACL injury, and that's not the only injury he's had over the years. So that could definitely hurt his draft stock, but there's a lot of positives as well to him. And so for, someone who was selected at 76, there is a world where he ends up being kind of like where did this guy come from? Like, really good starter someday. But number 1 is a player that I haven't seen anyone really talk about, but I think could be a really good player for the Kansas City Chiefs. Yes, I think the Chiefs might have done it again with how they go about corners. They've done this in the past where they get someone who, he's someone who is strong. He's athletic enough to work in man coverage. You don't necessarily see him as scheme proof, but for this Kansas City scheme, I do think someone like Noel Williams could be someone that for the Chiefs, they like to use several different corners when their defense is at its best. And we've seen them in the past draft these corners kind of in the mid rounds. He was selected 85, so he's a third round pick. And we've seen the Chiefs be able to do a good job at selecting these types of players. So, you already have, obviously, they added Christian Fulton. They have, Jalen Watson and Joshua Williams. We'll see what happens with Williams. You have Trent McDuffie and Jamari Connor, but they want another body in the room. And I don't think it's crazy that Williams could end up being the guy that they ultimately go with, the guy that can do some stuff. So ultimately, yeah, this is the guy to look out for. These are my 7 under the radar picks that might end up being players that we, are very well aware of in a few years. But those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from ya. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.